I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Public Health and Safety Standing Committee on Tuesday, May 13th. And since it's just you and I, Ann, and you wrote the minutes, I thought they looked good, so let's just call them approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mr. Mayor, update? Mr. Chief.
Updates currently, I submitted the numbers to the mayor and Lonnie, about a week ago or a week and a half ago, or no, on the last day.
Yeah, those are in the packet.
Yep, they're in the packet. Currently still working with Danae on a cost funding grant, and which closes, I believe, at the end of this month. We'll have an answer soon.
Good.
COP funding plan for SRO.
For
An extra officer.
An extra officer, tentatively SRO. We're still balancing that out. Like to see an SRO.
And didn't the school board's request for more funding
Did it?
pass?
Yes, it did.
And in the small print at the end, it said safety.
It did?
So.
Yep. No, we're still in correspondence with the school about that. It's kind of an ongoing discussion right now. And if I have an update too, go ahead.
I was waiting my turn.
No, you're good.
So the chief and I called Fitz Wednesday morning and said, what are we looking at and what does this mean? And the short version of the question is, am I providing the city funding for a school resource officer in the budget? And as you look at the budget that was presented, by the way, it does include a school resource officer in there. His answer was, no, actually what we're doing here is boilers, and what we're hoping is it will save enough on utilities that it will allow us to fund a school resource officer. Subsequent to that conversation, I've talked to a couple of different school board members and basically said, that you guys need to tell us whether you want an SRO or not, and I'm hoping that they will step in. And as I've talked to people in the community, my response has been reach out to your school resource officer, because they've got to figure out how to get it into their budget. We've looked at it, and I considered whether to do it without that source of funding, and the answer is we just can't, because we don't have the money. And so we have our plan B, which is we have a grant application that our chances are reasonable, but it's not known yet. It's a couple of months before we'll know anything on that. So we've still got it in the budget, but either we get the grant or they've got to step up and do some of theirs, or we still don't have one. So I think at this point it's the city has been sold and has some additional benefit we will get from doing that, but it's the school board and their executive and board that need to come up and say, yep, we're going to finance this.
So when they put it on the ballot, they said it was for three things, and one of them was safety. So you're saying that
the conversation that we had afterwards, that's a goal. We're hoping we'll save some money on utilities and use it for safety.
Yeah, so since that door's open, I'll just say, about a year and 8 months ago, the school district reached out to me and expressed their interest in having a school resource officer, a legitimate one, to which we've been working on for the last year and 8 months, and this is where it sits right now.
Are they talking about this like a school? I guess I should go to a school board meeting, but
It'd be a good idea.
do they talk about these? Is it on the agenda at all?
They've spoken about it when I've showed up.
But are you on the agenda?
Yeah, I've got spoken about.
Okay.
Or it may have been in public comments, whatever their battle rhythm is there. But I did pretty much discuss the pros and cons, which the pros far outweigh the cons, which the con for a school resource officer, the only one I can possibly think of, is funding. Everything costs money. It's it can be difficult. However, it's we're talking about child and staff safety here. Not to be dramatic, but
that's what it is.
That's what it is. Yep. So I've been working on this with the mayor, with candidates, with city council, with public health and safety, with Danae for about a year and 8 months, and this is where it sits right now. I'm not too happy about it.
And
Which is
I think
exactly where it was a year and
the
6
city
months.
stands ready to step in for our part, but the conversation was started, if we X, will you Y? And I think we're solid on the, we'll come through with the Y, it's X needs to happen first. or our
Let's
hands
keep
are
it in the
pretty much
budget because, okay.
tied.
I'm
So
good,
we're preparing for the possibility eventuality, but.
I'm gonna move things around since the mayor, since the chief has to leave a little early. Number 6 was discussion on the active city ordinances that need amending. It was pointed out that the current ordinance on nudity, I know, here we go again, isn't as useful as it should be.
Am I
And,
looking at a different copy? I have that as number 7 on mine.
really? Okay, well, I printed out mine, so I'm missing something on the upper half. Okay, well, anyway, taking a look at it, the suggestion for rewriting, which we need to run past, our attorney anyway. The first A was the same as the original, which is, it shall be unlawful for any person within the limits of the city to appear in any public place in a state of nudity or in any indecent or lewd dress, or to make any indecent exposure of his or her person, or to commit any indecent or lewd or filthy act in any place in the city. So that's the same as the original. The, change here is a person shall also be guilty of this offense if for the purpose to intimidate, harass, or disturb the peace of another.
May I interject real quick?
Please.
So any type of nudity call for service, because we do have them. Any type of nudity call for service, any type of lewd or lascivious act, we're gonna be charging under state code.
Okay?
You know, the act itself obviously should be charged under state code because it carries a heftier penalty. I mean, like, obviously, we have discretion in what we're charging, whether it's a municipal code infraction or if it's a state code, but likely for something, I would say severe nudity, depending on what's happening. I mean, like, somebody streaks during a parade, a kid's just acting like a fool, that's one thing. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's the other stuff, we would charge state code.
So do we need a nudity, ordinance if the state covers it?
Can I
Right.
interject? We talked about this 3 weeks ago, and I think we agreed at that meeting to move it on to Dennison, the city attorney. So I don't think we can come up with anything in our, you know,
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
This is something that I could discuss with, Dennison, if I'm directed by the mayor to discuss it with Dennison, have a 5-minute conversation, get it hammered out.
The only thing that I, thought was silly in the original was that you can in any way dispose of any indecent book.
You know.
Let's just dispose of the indecent books, and right now it's against the law to dispose of an indecent book.
So we find the
But of course, we don't know what an indecent
old
book
magazines
is.
from the 80s and they throw them away it's a municipal code infraction.
That's what it says.
That's a little silly.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, then we'll leave that one to, Dennison. Peddlers, I know that we've had issues with peddlers and soliciting.
Mhm.
Have you had a chance to read through these yet?
Yeah, I read them, and, I just think that it's, archaic language, we don't even know when it was written, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I just go update it and make it relevant to now, but none of it's really relevant.
Well, they're basically saying that peddlers are a declared nuisance
Well, they are, I mean.
and going on
there's-
private property.
Yeah, I'd say, peddlers, like common day panhandling, scheming.
But there's the vans, back in the day when I was over there,
Oh, yeah.
the vans that came into town with loads of people, and they get out and just go around the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, they're still doing it.
But yeah, but that's legal,
If they have a city business license,
But-
I believe they're selling it good.
but
Do you know what I mean?
it's annoying, but it's
Oh, yeah.
legal.
And it's a
It can be
nuisance.
legal,
So
but,
that's what this is saying, is it's a nuisance.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, if a property owner has clear display of no soliciting, no trespassing, that is, as far as the state's concerned and the law's concerned, and I'm sure Dennison would agree with me, that is,
They have to have it posted?
No soliciting, you see those signs on everybody's fence.
I wouldn't say, so you can ask somebody to leave, but like, for example, if I have a no trespassing sign on my property and somebody willfully, and like you see the sign, somebody
Enters.
willfully enters onto my property and they're remaining, it's a criminal charge. The way the state reads is if I don't have a sign, somebody shows up and they're on my property, I say you need to leave, and then if they remain, that is classified as a criminal trespass. So, I mean, I'm not telling every homeowner to, go out and buy no soliciting and no trespassing signs, because frankly, maybe some people just love the company, but, it's,
We do have an older population.
Sure, yeah, so it's, yeah, it's one of
So
those,
is
and
it-
we handle those types of things swiftly when they're becoming an issue. We've actually just rolled up on them ourselves, and pretty much said, hey, what are you doing? And, you know, and then the van will come pick them up and then they'll leave.
Is the current, municipal code a problem?
Regarding,
Peddling.
peddling, no.
Okay,
No.
so that doesn't need to,
Oh.
the soliciting, I understand, was more, and I know that we've had issues with solicitors. And,
Sure.
And I think there is a public health and safety concern or element there, just because we do have an older population. And I can think of one time when I've been called out because there was soliciting going along in Ward 2, you know, your neighbor said your siding needs fixed, or your roof is bad, or that sort of thing.
So that's a good way to start problems.
And at the time, I had looked up and found some code, but I didn't find the individuals. I just went down and drove because I was out and about.
Yep.
And I couldn't find them, so I figured by the time you guys got there, you wouldn't be able to find them either.
Yep.
But then, the officer who filled in for you, when he kind of raised that as a concern, I couldn't, did he?
Sergeant Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Did he have specific suggestions, or that was one that he was, so I think the answer is, we want to make sure that we have in place, whether it be state or if necessary municipal, the driving forces, we want to be able to adequately provide public health and safety. And I'm comfortable saying, have you reviewed, if you want to relay those on to the chief, and then he can work with Dennison if there's changes. And
okay,
maybe I think our, in line with, your responses, the first line of response is let's find out where we are and what needs done. If there's a known what needs to be done, then we can address it.
okay.
But that's a decision outside of our field of expertise.
Oh, yeah.
So what we make it so if they come to us and says this needs to be made so, and in fairness, we have one request that says this needs to be made so, but that's not his position to make that final determination either. Well, we appreciate it being alerted to it, that's not a problem. Council Chair,
Yes. Then we'll go ahead and I'll send
Council
those
Chair.
over to you.
you have it.
So, yes.
Question, at the store, when somebody pulls into the parking lot, starts,
I know where you're going.
Panhandling.
Yeah, yeah.
okay, we have them removed.
Yep.
But then they go on public right of way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have the ability
Yes.
to move them along
Yes.
once they, because they'll move to the sidewalk and
Mhm.
still be a nuisance, so,
Yeah, correct.
okay.
And I will send this over. You guys, I'll send it over for you to check out, and Dennison, and,
Okay.
and that was the suggestions that were made at the last meeting. Okay, moving along. I think that we can get pretty quick here with dumpsters. It was raised that roll-offs have chain lids. Is there any problem with the way we've got it written, just because it's a roll-off? Is that considered a dumpster? I would.
Yes.
So we don't need to list all kinds of dumpsters that's available, dumpsters, roll-offs, trailers.
I would say construction trailers.
I know, but
Debris trailers, something like that.
they nixed us with that, remember? No construction.
I'll check and make sure Ann's is within code every day when I drive by.
And I did talk to, Tom Coates,
Uh-huh.
because, Jody raised the issue that she felt that during July, it's very difficult for the restaurants they exceed their dumpsters. Yes,
I was gonna say, so I raised kind of that question at the resort tax meeting yesterday and had a follow-up conversation with Tom, and what we're gonna do is, going into the new conversation, that'll be part of our negotiate, there were 3 specific holidays, and it tends to be when they show up on weekends and stuff, and Monday's their day off for holidays or something. That was Memorial Day, 4th of July, and something, so, from an executive standpoint, what we'll be doing is, we'll be looking at how to better address that. I'm happy to report the business community, at least from those that were represented at that meeting, did not have a problem, did not feel that it was the city's job to come in and subsidize them, kind of the conversations that we had here. And they identified 3 specific weekends, and they thought that the answer was probably with negotiations through the trash company. And even though that is provided separately, meaning those commercial districts are not part of the city cut thing, one of the, we can have language in there that possibly says, if you're providing trash service within Red Lodge, you have something to address these. So we'll have a conversation with them to figure out how we can address those specific weekends that were identified, and or the possibility of increasing coverage from a provider side.
Yeah, and I got that same impression as well. So I don't think that we need to
I agree.
be worried about that. So moving on, yeah,
Before can we comment or make? a
Oh, no,
question
go
now?
ahead.
I didn't know if I had to wait again. So I'm Brian Sweet from Beartooth Books, and so in addition, yesterday at the business meeting, which I was not at, Tom was expressed that the dumpsters overflow because there's not the pickup on Monday and it's weekends. But I was hoping that we could encourage the town to also pick up on all weekends, just the regular trash cans on the street,
On
because
the
they
street.
typically overflow. I sent you a picture last year of
Yeah.
one.
And we will step it up from the city standpoint.
Yes.
and there was that discussion as well.
Yeah, perfect. And it may be more trash cans, but I think the real thing is the picking up. And it's not just the holiday, it's pretty much any Sunday in front of the coffee roasters, that thing is overflowing in. And I think it's the same, I'm not the same person, but the public bathrooms down by the four-way.
Okay, that was not brought up, the public bathrooms.
Same thing on those busy weekends. You walk in there, because I used to have to use them when I didn't have any plumbing in my house for about a year. And so if you walk in there on a summer weekend,
A
it's
year?
fine now, but on a Sunday, it's nuts. So I don't know if that's the same.
And
person
we
or not.
understand that what happens is people that don't have trash service dump it in there.
Oh, I didn't mean the trash, I just mean them at the bathrooms, but I assumed it was the same,
Oh, cleaning the bathroom?
person.
Okay.
That I don't know that. but,
That's something that we just point out to the mayor and,
Yeah, so, but anyway, but it is certainly busy weekends, or should I say holiday weekends? It's probably not pick up on Monday, but I think it's on here all weekends. As sales tax revenue goes up, trash goes up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good analogy.
Mr. Mayor.
I have a secondary question. So tonight, I have been participating in the Bear Aware community forums. One of the things that I get to do via the charter is, accept the mayor may appoint without the consent of council temporary committees established by the mayor. So that Bear Aware thing is actually not just a Red Lodge centric thing, it's actually Red Lodge and surrounding areas. But in going to that and kind of making sure that it gets traction this time and turns into something, what I'm doing is creating basically a city contingent to that Bear Aware community, and I'll be making some appointments tonight. And I would like to get their involvement, because again, going back to why are we talking about trash, my understanding from a city public health and safety, there were 2 things. One is the litter, the blowing part, which seemed to be primarily around construction dumpsters. And then the other one was the human-bear conflict, attractant element. And so as you guys are addressing that, I wanted to have some input so that there's a cross between what we're doing and what those committee efforts are doing to do that. So
Yeah,
I'll be appointing some folks that I think can come in and help us with additional items, just suggestions, just their emphasis will be specifically on human-bear conflict.
and I noticed that, also at that Business Alliance meeting, Tom brought up that birds are an issue, but I don't think that there's anything we can possibly do. That the birds get in the dumpsters in any little crack and then grab stuff and pull it out.
You're talking about magpies.
I don't necessarily accept that. I mean, I think that's something for you to look at, if something is done or doable or not, that's within your realm, but, yeah, so maybe that's Because if a bird pulls it out, it's now suddenly a bear attractant. So
Yeah,
I think that's part of what to address, is you guys look at how do we regulate it and how do we control it.
yeah, that one's gonna be, not so easy.
And I think keeping bears out of the alleys and whatnot is very much within public health and safety umbrella.
Yeah,
And the bears don't breed, so we'll have to regulate the humans.
and,
Just for my notes, Mayor, how do you define step up? Are you gonna, like, somebody gonna go around Monday
Yeah,
morning?
we'll do it, we'll do it more frequently, we'll check, and including if we need to check over weekends. So
Okay.
what we'll do is we'll do a daily monitoring.
Does somebody work on the weekends?
We have had at times, I've gone through and pulled them, Mike's gone through and pulled them, and then most of our public works guys, if they see it or observe it, they will go out and address it. But I think we can make sure it's been kind of a 3-day-a-week kind of monitoring, and I think in line with those comments, I don't think that's sufficient during. And I think the
The summer.
corollary observation between, if your revenue's going up, so is your trash, I think is a logical.
Yeah,
It's one of those things that you say, yeah, that passes the smell test,
okay. Well, I just
so to
wanna
speak.
give more details about what could happen there, okay?
okay. Now,
Thanks for coming.
on my agenda, I don't know at what point the agenda changes. I still had snow on here, but I think that we pretty much, we discussed is it going to be okay for the city? I know we talked last time that the city clears the sidewalks of snow on the south end of town. And we talked about the roundabout north, asking the property owners to clear it, but then it seemed unfair that the city is doing it from the south end, that they should also do it to the north end. Is the city willing to do that so that we don't need to change our ordinance? And to make it even worse is that once the highway is widened, there's gonna be a lot more sidewalks than there is now. And are you gonna exclude the hospital sidewalk, because they do it anyway?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, the hypothesis, or whatever else was in there. The short version is, council's gonna dictate what we do, and it's my job to execute what council lays down.
Okay.
Well, we talked about it 3 weeks ago, about Willie, I hate to bring people's names up in public, but blame him for good or for ill, but Willie does that, and south of town, so we thought, well, the city is, it's not the central business district, it's not concentrated, so equipment could go down north of this traffic circle and do those sidewalks. Because it's a big sidewalk, it's kind of an industrial-looking sidewalk, it's not these cute little sidewalks we have here. So we're talking about Willie, or whoever plows down there could easily come up here and do it just down to Family Dollar. It won't be a big deal. Easy for me to say, but that was the thinking, that we're trying to encourage people to walk more. Why not add that? Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so why not?
Don't confuse this as a challenging, it's just a question. We've had several people who have laid out, why does the city require businesses on Broadway to do that? Why doesn't the city do that as part of resort tax and stuff? I have verified that there are a lot of big cities that they do start out, like with their plowing, as an example. Now, that's different from sidewalks, but there is a different level of service that they provide for the businesses versus the residentials. And so part of it, am I correct in that we're still not hearing where city's gonna take that on? If we would have to outsource, we don't have the resources to do it. If we were gonna have somebody do it, we'd have to pay to have it done.
But if you're plowing here, why can't you plow
You're
there?
talking about to the south.
South of the traffic,
If you're
north
doing
of the
south,
traffic
then
circle.
go ahead and do to the north.
Yeah,
Like I said, I think that's council's purview to say this is the way it's gonna be done, and then we'll do that.
So
So
we need
what the
we'll
city-
Just
bring
do
that, so we'll bring that up tonight as a discussion item, north versus south.
But, you know, we'd have to invest in smaller, mightier equipment if we were gonna take on Central Business District. You can't just take,
It's because of all the benches and the things
Yeah.
that are in the way, so, yeah, it doesn't.
My job is to execute the will of council, so.
Well, I'm gonna leave the ordinance alone for now, we'll check, because right now it excludes north of the traffic circle. And if in fact the city council thinks that the city should take care of it north of the traffic circle, then we'll leave that as an exclusion in the current ordinance.
Or is it consistency that if we're going to property owners are responsible and the city ought not to be doing it where there's any property owners unless it's after the follow-up? So, in other words, we're doing that one to the south that's adjacent to private property.
Yes,
Why? And why are we doing that and not doing that is really, it's a consistency thing
yeah.
as much as anything. But there's two ways out of that, right? One is we don't do that, and one is we add that.
where does the, go ahead, I mean, you can have
I
a
think-
question.
Having lived here for a while, it seems to be a safety issue south of town. That the people who stay at the hotels tend to walk in the middle of the highway to get to town, because those sidewalks have traditionally not been maintained. And this year, the city took it upon themselves, for whatever reason, to use their equipment and clear those sidewalks, which kept people out of the highway.
Can I ask a clarifying question? To your observation, is this the first year that has happened? Or is it a
It
recent
It
development?
used to be that the state would come in occasionally and do it. They would bring equipment in and do it, kind of like they do Main Street. When someone deemed it was needed, they would bring in equipment and clear the sidewalk. So, this is the first year I recall the city using city equipment to, on a more regular basis, maintain those sidewalks. I don't know who made the decision, but I don't think it's a bad thing, because it keeps people out of the highway.
Does that,
To my knowledge, we've never had anybody hit by a vehicle on the highway. Do you recall any incidents?
Were we talking like South and 19th Street?
Yeah.
Not that I've been on, but I have had, I mean, obviously in the middle of downtown, I've had people hit by cars, yeah.
Yeah.
But south and personally, for me, and I can't speak for everybody, I mean, like maybe one of my guys has had, get hit in the past, north,
Seems like they tend to get hit
In the summer,
when they jump out from behind a car on the corner to cross the street. And
yeah.
you really don't have a lot of reaction time to miss them. But
does the same logic that you're talking about applying to the south apply to the north in your observational opinion?
I guess that's, since I live south of town, I observe it. I don't live north of town, so I seldom that I go past the roundabout going north. So I haven't, I don't have the history of observation that I do south.
There is a lot of, in my opinion, there is a lot of foot traffic, north of the, traffic circle, foot and bicycle.
And Bill Foisey did send us an email stating that it needs to be done because people are walking in the street north of the traffic circle.
Mhm.
And, why are the rules different from downtown than it is from north?
Yeah.
Okay,
But-
so I have an action item from a mayor's perspective of, to do a follow-up with Mike to discuss how we handle north versus south. Am I taking away the right takeaway?
Yeah.
yeah, and, we probably can't talk about it today at Public Works because it's not on the agenda, but,
Well, you can talk about whatever you'd like to in the council section.
Okay, but-
We're not taking action on it.
yeah.
And my recollection from Public Works perspective is, our biggest concern was addressing the stuff where your snow ends up on your property or adjacent to your property, not in the public right of way and not on your neighbors. And
Yeah.
that's part of that resolution.
Yes, that needs to be in the resolution that you can't put,
Are
Your
you
snow on your
done with that and happy with that?
I'm happy with that part. There was one part of the resolution that Jody explained why it's in there, is that we weren't going to, list all of the, additional offenses. And so the first portion of the penalty for noncompliance was what's happening now, which is a 24-hour notice of a written warning, and after that, the city can remove the snow and charge the person. But then after that, then there was additionally, in case of the failure of any person whose duty it is hereby to remove snow and ice within the time prescribed above, the Red Lodge Police Department shall serve notice of noncompliance or cite the person or persons responsible as follows. And then apparently what this is you've got the first time that they've been non-compliant, and then these were the second time. So even though it said first offense, it's subsequent offense after the first offense. So we need to redo this, and I'm still not convinced that we should put dollar amounts in there. I think
My
that should be set by
recollection is
resolution.
that part of what needed to be done was there's gonna be a resolution that set the fines. So the ordinance shouldn't set the fines, it should say,
Right,
the fines are set by resolution. Has any progress been made on setting?
That was what I was
Fines
going to
by
discuss
resolution?
today too, because it says it's the second offense, it's a $50 fine. And to me, that is exactly what it cost them to move the snow. So it's my concept is that a fine is to encourage them that it's cheaper to remove the snow than it is to pay the fine. So I don't know how you feel about it, Ann, but I wanted to pump the $50 up to $100. And then the third offense would then be $200 instead of $100.
that's fine.
Because I want the fine to be more than what it costs them to
Right,
remove the snow. So we'll put that in the ordinance, in our resolution. And I'll get that written. And I think that should be it. I'll review it again before.
And that's a piece that's missing before we take it to council. That's kind of what I remember is that it was missing the resolution, and it was, since we were taking the fines out of the ordinance, the resolution needed to be done simultaneously then.
Yes,
And it is springtime, so we probably won't have an issue, but it would be nice to have this done before winter gets here.
yeah, we could actually, table it for a while. Well,
No, I don't think tabling it.
No, we're already
It's
there.
not the highest priority, but I don't think tabling is it.
we're already there. Now, what did you have on your agenda that I don't have on mine? Because the only other thing I have on here besides, reviewing the timeline is animal control.
I can't speak. This is what was in the packet and what went out, so.
My computer is not doing what it's supposed to do. That's snow. Well, okay, the resolution and the ordinance were on both of yours.
Okay, well, I have the ordinance as one and the resolution as a second.
Exactly, so that's why. On the animal control, I want to wrap this thing up because we've been looking at it too long. I mean, really. And I'm still kind of, up in the air. I know that the judge didn't like the definition of a vicious dog, but it seems what I saw in here was a vicious dog versus a dangerous dog. Dangerous dog is dangerous to other animals, and a vicious dog was vicious to a person. Should we leave dangerous and vicious both in there, or do we remove dangerous and just say that a vicious dog, whether it's to a person or another dog?
I'd say dangerous and vicious.
Leave them both?
There's one,
I was thinking about them, because how you prove, usually you prove that they're a vicious or dangerous dog is because they've done something in the past. That's how you get to that point. And so if you're waiting until they bite somebody, I don't think that's a good idea. As long as they've attacked a dog in the past, I think it would be classified, and then they have additional penalties. So I would combine the two.
Just leave it as a vicious dog,
I
whether,
would combine the dangerous dog and vicious dog into one, instead of separating them out.
Meaning like dangerous/vicious, or pick one and leave it and the other one is dropped, and which one would you keep?
It doesn't matter, either one.
why don't we do the slash, dangerous/vicious?
That works, perfect.
Let's-
And then combine them into one.
Has the wording that,
I like it.
Have you guys weighed in on what you think the wording is, so that, like I said, it's council's job to pass it, but I think you guys advise this is what we need to do our jobs.
I have not seen that.
That's really what it boils down to.
With, Denison's assessment there.
Just go
I
ahead.
think a point of interest, I have a dog that was attacked when he was a puppy, so now he thinks that you fight first and be friends later with other dogs.
Mhm.
He has no aggression towards humans whatsoever. So if he gets in a dog fight, but he's always friendly to humans, how do we address that?
It's the sole responsibility of the animal owner to make sure that the dog is safely secured while walking,
Right,
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Doesn't attack man or beast.
but
Well,
I
bears,
guess
okay.
my concern is, I've got my dog on a leash, I get this all the time, people let their dogs run, and they go, my dog's friendly, and I'm like, my dog's friendly too, but he thinks there's a process you have to go through, you have to fight and then become friends, but he's not a vicious dog, or a dangerous dog. You know, it's a behavior that's hard to change once
Once you've had that
environmental
experience.
things have taken place, like being attacked when you're a puppy. So if somebody says, reports me as having a dangerous dog, because their dog ran up to him and he
Their
him,
dog, their unleashed
so now
animal.
all of a sudden I'm classified as having a dangerous or vicious animal, even though it is no threat.
One thing that we're forgetting too is the officer's investigative efforts when they arrive. This can all be determined by a police officer when he arrives. Rod has his dog on a leash. The other person did not.
Was
Rod's
not in
dog-
control of their dog.
Correct. So Rod's dog hit the other dog when it walked up to him. Well, dogs fight sometimes. That's just how it is. Whose dog was on a leash at the time?
My dogs fight with each other.
Yes.
So I come back to, from an executive perspective and from a staff perspective, do they have the tools to do their job, and that matches or aligns with the will of council? So if you've got some specific questions, and I know we talk about not having questions on the agenda, like, are we this, blah, 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 because that's kind of like the discussion. I think it's appropriate if you want to send those over, if this group wants to come up with questions. We have a question about vicious or dangerous, for example. What is the recommendation? Does the current language capture what your intent is of what needs to be done? If there are questions or stuff out there, then send that over to the attorney for review. Do carbon me on that, please, just for awareness. And again, like I said, this was initiated, I think my recollection is this was initiated by the judge, and I don't remember how much police was directly involved with that or not, but to me, that when we're done is, when we have the
Yeah.
regulations in place that staff, and you've got a prosecutor, you've got a police chief, and you've got a judge, when they say, these are the tools we need to do it, then it's done. And until that point, and then it aligns with your will and wishes. So they could come in and say, we think if somebody has a dog with two different color eyes, that ought not to be allowed in town. I just thought, because you as council may say, yeah, we don't think that. So like I said, there's those that have the tool, and then the wishes of council. Once you establish what your goal is, then do they have the tools to enforce it and get it done?
Okay.
Chair, we can't, have it, a lot of this stuff is anecdotal, but we have to trust the police to have common sense and just do their job. But we can't cover everything that may or
Might
may
happen.
not happen. We just have to give some, some essentials, but let Greg and his people or do their job. But there's no way, because everyone has an anecdote about what happened to me, and that doesn't go in an ordinance. We just have to have the essentials and let Greg.
We need
and
to
his-
give them the tools.
Give them the tools, thank you, and then,
There's
is
a
that
lot-
Greg, am I?
Absolutely correct, 100%. There is the letter of the law, and there is the spirit of the law. All of these guys that I got working here, every single one of them's got common sense. We know even when we can enforce laws, it always the right thing to do, maybe not, depending on the situation,
Right.
so.
I want to back this up just a little bit because, and Greg had stepped out of the room for a moment, but, going back to snow, we have there defined the first time that it's a warning and then the second offense is the subsequent offense is a fine. To me, that is interesting because we don't do that with anything. Now, maybe that's what council wants. We always want to ensure that the first time it's a warning, that's fair. But, our ordinances don't say the first time you get pulled over for speeding, it's a fine, or it's a warning, and then the second time, the officer discretion allows them to do that. But how come our snow has a documented warning where everything else? Rather than leaving that
It doesn't.
Regarding animal ordinance there?
The first paragraph of the snow states that you give them a written warning, and then 24 hours later, the city can remove the snow. Then it says additionally, and what Jody says that was in there for additional offenses. After that first time, the additional offense is the first time you get a warning, then you get fined, and then it goes down to, I think it was a public safety.
My question is, why do our regulations state that for dogs or for snow, there is always a warning rather than just saying you could get a fine the first time in officer's discretion?
I don't believe that there's anything in this ordinance about what happens to you. There's nothing about fines, there's nothing about warnings. What happens is, let's see, it doesn't have anything in here about fines or warnings.
But didn't you all just, I remember coming to the meetings last fall, but didn't you just pass sleeping in parks or parking and that had fines?
Yeah,
You passed an ordinance in October, November about,
Camping in public right of ways?
yes, camping. It was a
but
camping
those,
ordinance.
I thought some fines were listed there, and then that was an ordinance. I'm not arguing anything, I'm
No,
just saying
and-
that is another incident of having fines delineated.
Well, and as part of the ordinance, as a part of a resolution. Okay, and but does it stipulate that there will be a warning before there's ever an actual fine? That to
In
me
snow,
is just,
yes. In snow, yes.
I think everything, I'm not disagreeing with anything, but I think we're getting too into, these ordinances should be simple. And whoever has to enforce them, can let them enforce them, but we can't just, that's why it takes so long to get these done, because we're just, the minutia is,
It's like this, we have the tools and the authority to do our jobs under the state of Montana. It would be simplified if the city kind of followed suit. And
but that's true of animals, for instance, but probably not of snow. Snow is probably a more local thing. How, does
Correct.
does MCA have snow removal codes?
What about moving snow onto a public right of way like a highway?
They have stuff like that. For example, you can't create a nuisance, you can't create an issue, especially obstruction of public right of ways. There's things like that. But just snow removal on private property, they don't really have anything like that.
Yeah.
'Cause
Do they have anything about moving your snow onto another private property?
not really. Technically, it could be a trespass. You could absolutely, like, tie it into a trespass, or you could tie it into, and that's a criminal side of things. You could tie it into a civil, because you can't create a hazardous condition for some reason.
At the end of the day, it's very rare that I or any teammate that I have shows up on a call where we're scratching our heads. And if they're, and believe me,
That's good.
and believe me, sometimes those calls do pop up with like family issues and stuff like that, custodial issues. And at the end of the day, if we're kind of like, ooh, we just call our attorney.
Yeah.
And just get direction there. Pretty simple. But with that, I do have to step out and go to another meeting before I leave. Is there anything else from you?
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else?
And
No, the only-
if you shoot for a 10-2 wrap-up, so we have time to start the next meeting, we'll be.
Yeah. I just want to say that in the animals under penalties and fines, it's basically, they may accrue for multiple offenses. see relevant resolution for list of specific penalties and fines. So we'll have to try to dig out that resolution, because I don't think I've ever seen that. So there should be some resolution somewhere for penalties and fines for, animal control. But in the ordinance itself, it just has the first offense, the Red Lodge PD shall inquire whether the dog owner and complainant have communicated and attempted to reach a resolution. And then the second offense is after 2 weeks, the offense continues, the PD shall issue a citation to the dog owner. And then it goes on to say the third offense is after 72 hours of the issuance of the second or subsequent citation. Red Lodge PD shall issue additional citations pursuant to resolution, and penalties and fines for damage to property. And again, so there's got to be a resolution.
Do
On
members of your board have what you're looking at?
Yes.
With them?
I don't have it with me, no.
Okay. To me, this is terribly inefficient to stand up and read it. People don't have in front of them what they need to have the discussion, so.
Yeah. Well, they had it. Anyway, so there is a resolution I'll have to dig out and try to find on fines for animal control, because that's gonna have to go with this, and we'll take a look at that as well.
I'm still a little bit frustrated, I guess, to understand what happens next that's moving us closer to the thing, other than reaching out and including attorney and chief police to say, where are the gaps that we need to fix so that you can do the job?
And Judge, I wanna do that, and then I need to pull out the resolution to put the two together.
And we've seen where there's not always agreement between those entities, and so that's a worthwhile conversation that we can have too.
Yes. Rod?
I'm hearing, is there a state law versus a city law? I'm gonna back up to a few administrations ago, that there was a push by the city attorney at the time, that as a revenue source, we develop city ordinances to cover state ordinances, because somehow that money generated from the fines helped the city financially. And so there's this move to ignore state statutes and
Or to override them with city.
override them with city statutes as a revenue source. Okay, so now the question is, do we need all these extra city ordinances?
Does that move the needle worthwhile for the effort?
You know, is it, so there's real, I mean, these four city ordinances, a lot of them were written to override the state ordinance so that the funding would
Come to the
come to
city.
the city.
Hmm.
So now the question is that more of a hassle than what it's worth?
City attorney, do you have an opinion? If we basically write the same ordinance at the city level, so we get the money rather than the state,
How long of discussion do you want?
1 minute and a half?
Okay. Speeding, I'll just use that one as an example. You can charge somebody under the state code section for speeding, and usually the fine is about, $20 to $80 for speeding. However, it goes on people's driving record, which then impacts their insurance. If you charge them under the city code, the fine is usually about $100 to $150, and yes, the money comes to the city. But the problem is, since it's a violation of a city ordinance, it doesn't go on their driving record, doesn't affect their insurance, and doesn't get reported in the normal course of business.
And we do have neighbor cities who do that. So for instance, in Bridger, that's where they do that. And they did a survey in the Billings Gazette or something last year, it's like, #1 towns you don't want to speed at in Montana, and,
Oh, yeah,
and Bridger won, because they have city codes, and so they end up writing people city codes that don't end up, and where it's particularly helpful is out-of-staters that are going through there. Now, philosophically speaking, I can offer my 2 cents. I don't think fines and tickets are a source of revenue. I think it's
the goal is compliance. So anyway, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. And so that's just.
Am I wrong in my thinking?
No, not really, no, not at all. So the difference is just between like this, that's just one example of the speeding. So the state code is a lot lower fine, but it gets reported in the course and scope of business, goes on their insurance, it hits their driving record.
It hurts.
Yeah, it hurts, exactly. Or if you have a CDL, it gets reported there. The city ordinance, is a higher fine, and it goes a lot more to the city, but because it's a city ordinance, none of those reporting requirements happen. It doesn't go on their insurance, doesn't get reported on the CDL, and so a lot of those background things that are supposed to be in place don't happen. There's not a lot of ordinances on the books now that are there just for, changing state code into city code. A lot of those have been dealt with or gone away, in the past recent years, and so there's not a lot, but there's in the criminal code and specifically the traffic, there's a whole bunch.
Interesting.
And I would say of all of those, whether we're talking fireworks, snow, trash,
Anywhere.
the goal, in my humble opinion, of public health and safety is compliance.
Yeah.
And so, to me, this, where we need to step in is where state code doesn't address public health and safety. Trash is an example. Snow is an example. Dog, animals may or may not be an example, I don't know.
Yeah, and so that's where I was going with that. The trying to rewrite all the state codes into city codes just to obtain a higher fine, you're gonna waste money on just enforcement. Like, that's not a viable option. I mean, it technically is, but in practice, you're not gonna be making money.
And I did pull state code in the beginning of looking at this. I'll have to have another relook at it. And I wanna pull the resolution as well for the fines, just to see what it is and see what the state also has.
You can put the fines directly in the ordinance. I know there was some discussion earlier about.
Well, just because it's easy to, resolutions are
amend an
one
ordinance.
reading versus, there's a lot of things where, like utilities, we don't set in the ordinance, we set via resolution. 'Cause
No,
we
and
don't
that's
get
a
in regulation.
fantastic idea. A lot of times, yeah, that's a great idea. But something like this, where sometimes it's easier just to look in one code section instead of saying, you know, here's the ordinance, and then you have a resolution, and then, because sometimes they don't match. So something small that's gonna be on the books for a long time, you can just put, you know, the fine in there, you don't have to
And you
have the
can-
ordinance, that's the resolution. But yeah, the code section.
I think philosophically, that last, as strange as it sounds, that last conversation to me helps me feel like we're moving the ball forward in that.
I thought so.
We can recognize, kind of as the first question in here, is this addressed by the state, or is it something that the state doesn't get involved in, and we need to get involved with from a city standpoint?
I'll check it out.
And I think snow and trash fall into that category. I think dogs probably do.
May not, yeah. And we're changing it to animal control because there's more.
Animal control.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
dogs are more the nuisance.
We're, time we've got to start the other meeting.
I think we're ready. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this meeting off. So we're adjourned.